Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Season 2 of Above the Tree Line. This season has proved to be so much fun and so very different from Season 1, and we're getting the opportunity to sit and talk with people who are really experts in their subject area. And so today we have Colby Huth again joining us, our men's and discipleship pastor at ACF.
Yeah.
And we are, again, I've said this before. I love looking at Barna research. I have been obsessed with them for, well over a decade. But you sent me a report recently that kind of hurt my heart a little bit. And I want to talk about that as somebody who, I am a pastor. This article was looking at both the strengths and the struggles of today's pastor. And it's like, where are we flourishing and where are we not doing so great?
Yeah.
And the areas where we're flourishing, unfortunately, I think are less of a priority than the areas where we need a little bit more help. Yes, faith is flourishing among pastors, which is...
Makes sense.
It better be. That's pretty
we have a
important.
problem if pastors are not flourishing in their faith.
Financially, they're flourishing. The older pastors seem to be doing a little bit better than their younger counterparts in this area. But this is the stat that really got me. When you take pastors and you compare them to other practicing Christians or just adults in America in general, where they are lacking is this first category is relationships.
Yeah.
How, pastor who's working for a church that's leading ministry, leading people to Christ, why are relationships struggling?
Yeah, great question. And it's kind of an ironic thing too, because I would say that most pastors recognize the importance of relationships and are encouraging people to go in that direction. And so I think that what we're seeing is a lot of pastors recognizing the ease that happens for other people, but feel there's a difficulty for themselves. And what I mean is that there is potentially this separation between, well, how can I have a deeper relationship with someone in my congregation that I'm also pastoring? And that can be a tricky road to maneuver for sure.
And the other piece of it is, this was when I became a pastor, I was like, oh my gosh, am I try to be on my best behavior. Am I expected to not sin as much as other people? It's kind of intimidating because sometimes you don't even want to tell people pastor, because they might be I expect you to behave here, don't make any mistakes, don't say any bad words, don't have any bad thoughts.
It's the glass house, right?
Yes.
You feel and I grew up as a pastor's kid, and so I feel like I've grown up in that glass house my whole life, and I think that the same is true for pastors today. Is everybody's watching, and we see time and again in the news pastors slipping and falling and
consistently
and falling off the pedestal.
Yes.
And so I think even if you're well, I'm not doing these huge scandals, you're still on alert for they might see other parts of my life that are messy, and I don't know if I want them to see that. Right.
Well, it's my small group of women that we support each other and pray for each other. None of us go to the same church. I'm every single one of us goes to a different church.
Yeah.
And it's almost because the church is supposed to be your safe place, but if I'm in a small group with other people in my congregation, I can't really go and talk about my frustrations with work.
Sure.
Not that I have any, because it's great, but you really do need to find community outside of the church. But if you work for the church and that's where you're spending all the time, how are you going to make these other relationships?
Yeah.
So the other category that I thought was interesting was just the overall well-being, talking mentally, physically, their general well-being. Practicing Christians, when you have the bar graph, practicing Christians have the highest, the best well-being, followed by all U.S. adults, and then the last place in this chart is pastors. This is physical and emotional and mental well-being. Again, is that tied to because of these lack of relationships? What's the deal with the physical health?
Yeah, I think it is. It's another piece of the relationships, and I think that there is, again, the irony of it of as a pastor, you would be encouraging everyone in your congregation to do these things. We want you to be doing well. You want your well-being to be off the charts. But I think that in the pursuit of that, as a pastor, you hear stories of these exceptional pastors and the way that they, burn the candle at both ends and give it all and die to self and do everything for their congregation because they are such good shepherds. But I think in the pursuit of that, you lose yourself too.
Yeah. And they burn out. I mean, they're just toast.
Yeah,
or as my kid would say, they're cooked. That's like that's the new way to say it.
Yeah.
But you see that like consistently. Pastors do burn out.
Yeah. It's very common. And I think it's because of this. There's this balance of how are you present for the people that you're pastoring and yet still caring for yourself, still caring for your family. And so it's easy to say, well, physical health, that's an easy one to slip because, instead of working out, I could be going and talking to so-and-so and counseling, or, I could be reading my Bible more, praying or doing things. Like, it's very easy to let things slip off because, well, it's for others.
Yeah.
I'm doing this for others versus my physical health. That's just for me. Or, my mental health, that's just for me. And I think that these are potential lies that we can tell ourselves as pastors.
Well, there is a smaller percentage of pastors that are extremely fit. These are like the influential pastors, the ones that you're seeing on TikTok and Instagram, and they've got they dress great, they've got good shoes, they got nice watches, and they're like super buff. But that's not indicative of the majority of pastors who are working in America. That's such a small percentage that get to kind of that level of influence. So you were talking before this about the somewhat of a disconnect between pastors and their current congregations because congregants have changed so much in the last couple of years, both age-wise and gender. We talked about gender roles, kind of switching. So what is the reason for this seeming disconnect between pastors behind the pulpit and the people in their congregation? Yeah,
and I think it kind of boils down to we've kind of had a similar formula for church for the past hundreds of years, and we continue to look after the nuclear family. Mom, dad, 2 kids or so, very straightforward, very easy to understand, and very easy to target your message to. It's easy to get up on Sunday and talk to this family. It's easy to produce events for this family.
Well, it's also probably their reality because most pastors are men, most pastors are married men, most pastors are married men with children. So that's what they identify with.
Yeah. I mean, and you've got all of the, the evidence you need at home that you can use to then inform, what you're teaching on, those kinds of things. And so for a more diverse church, it's trickier to feel like you identify with a pastor that continues to produce the same content that is geared towards this exact same demographic seemingly every time. I think that, I would say that a lot of pastors can probably traverse this potentially, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the congregation feels the connection there. And, if a pastor is also not necessarily practicing what they preach, that disconnect is also there. And so if a pastor's saying, hey, relationships are important, small groups are important, but they're not seeing that on the other side. Hey, your well-being is really important, but we're not seeing it on the other side. Then there is that disconnect because it's like, well, pastor's telling me one thing, but he's doing another. And so where is that disconnect? Why is one thing being said, but another thing is being practiced?
So how can we, people who work for the church or people even who attend the church, and people I'm a pastor, I work with other pastors. What can we be doing to not allow these areas where we're struggling in relationships and well-being? What are we supposed to do for each other? I don't. This hasn't really been on my radar so much. What's expected of us to kind of reverse the trend, the way that we're going?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's the self-care piece of it, and I think that we see in Scripture a lot of times dying to self is really important, and that's Jesus models that for us.
Expand on that a little bit for people who may not be familiar with the phrase.
Yeah, it's a very Christian term too, so I'm using the Christianese. But really, it's this idea that the gospel is for others, and so as Christians, we are called to care for the least of these and care for others, and we see that theme throughout all of Scripture. And so, as a pastor, it can be very easy to recognize that and say, well, that is what I need to be doing as a pastor, is giving up myself for others. And I think that's good. That's not a bad thing, but it's
At what cost?
at what cost? And when your cup is empty, how much more can you give if there's nothing to give anymore? And so it's kind of this continual practice of filling and pouring out that needs to happen. Again, it's going to look different for everybody, but I think that there's an importance to filling your cup,
right,
so that you can continue to pour out.
So, I mean, this isn't just true for pastors. This is true for a lot. I mean, you see it a lot with parents, even just the constant pouring out. So, what are some actual tangible practices that we can realistically put in place to make sure that, to use the phrase, our cup isn't empty?
Yeah, I think it's from the beginning recognizing the need for it. I think, if you just jump into I'm going to church, I'm in a small group, I'm doing the things, but you're not really doing it for the right reasons, then you might be doing the things, but they're not actually filling that cup. And so recognizing I have a need here as a parent, as a small group attendee, as a Christian, I need my cup to be full. And that means having, my quiet times, regularly, having a good prayer life, finding a mentor that can continue to pour into you, finding a small group where you feel like you can be comfortable and vulnerable and safe, finding a church community that you feel challenges you and continues to lift you up too.
I mean, that goes right in line with our discipleship model at ACF. So a lot of times we talk about the vertical access, making sure you're connected with God, your prayer life is strong, worship is strong, you're in the Word, and God is pouring into you, so that the horizontal access you can pour out to both the church and the world outside the church. I mean, both of those. I mean, it seems kind of daunting when you think about all the things that we're supposed to be doing. Yeah. And that's just in relation to our spiritual life. That doesn't even include our professional life, our familial life. Yeah. How do you squeeze in more and more stuff?
And see, I would say my challenge would be maybe you don't need to. And maybe instead of doing a lot of things pick things that you can do well. And so maybe there are things that need to trim off to provide space for you to fully invest, be fully present. And I think that one of the best examples would be in parenting. A lot of times I think we would say quality over quantity. It's obvious, but sometimes we are more focused on the hours that we spend or the dedication. I drove you to soccer practice. Does that not count? Those kind of things. But really it's that quality time with our kids. I think the same is true in our faith, in our well-being in general. I read my Bible, but did it really seep in? Yeah. Oh, I talked to another believer, but did you really go deep with it? And I think sometimes we might do the practices without creating the depth there. And so it's not really filling the cup very much. And I would challenge anybody listening to, regardless of being a pastor, Christian, not are the things that you're doing intentional, and are you fully invested in them when you're doing them? Or are you distracted, frustrated, annoyed, distant, whatever it is in that moment, that whatever you're doing is not actually fully engaged, fully present in that moment?
It's funny because almost every year, I didn't do it this year because I have realistic expectations, but every year, January 1st, I start the Read the Bible in a year. And at first it's really exciting. Yeah. And I'm and yes, I did this day's reading and this day's reading, but usually sometime around May, I'm oh my gosh, I got to catch up on 3 days. Yeah. Let's just let it play in the background while I'm doing whatever else. And I'm absorbing nothing, but I'm checking the box
off.
That, so I'm not actually reading the Bible in a year. Yeah. But I feel I get that little accomplishment badge that's I completed this task. Yeah. And so it's interesting because you talked about small groups. There have been times where we really enjoyed the small groups that we were a part of, especially when ACF had multiple communities. We had a community out where we live, but I wouldn't say that the small group always left us feeling fuller. Yeah. Especially when we had young kids and it was constantly having to leave the room and chase a child and get a bottle and missing out on what's being said, and then sometimes you don't want to bring the whole room down and be I'm not I'm not okay. Yeah. So there was there was a couple times that we ended up leaving small groups, not because we disliked the people, but because it felt like it was taking more than it was giving.
Yeah. It feels like a burden in those moments. And it's hard to say that about a small group, but it can feel like that you're like, oh my gosh, like I am dreading doing this, even though I'm supposed to do it. I'm dreading it. And I think that there's a line to walk there, because there's sometimes like spiritual practices are important because you practice them and it creates this, like you build up a muscle. You're working out, you're working something out. And sometimes persevering through something tough, even if it's like this small group is tricky, or, I am having a hard time continuing to focus on reading through the Bible, and it's we're in a book that's hard to get through, those types of things.
Chronicles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Numbers.
The ones where you're like, I'm reading a ton of names and I don't want to. But sometimes there's the discipline of like just persevering through it. But if you're not internalizing any of it, if it's not, again, like filling that cup, then it's kind of a vain pursuit.
Yeah.
And one of the things you mentioned kind of made me think of, again, another piece that I think sometimes the church can feel disconnected to the congregation is the piece like with kids and stuff like that. And a lot of times, like for young families or things like that, it's tricky to be involved when kids are present, and that's something that you're having to worry about. Like, sure, the kids are in the other room, but I hear them screaming, right. Or I hear all this stuff.
It's stressful.
And so it's stressful.
Yeah.
I'm distracted. It's hard to focus. And I think ways that the church can alleviate that is providing childcare, like those types of things to help with the process. And so, I think that understanding the demographic is another way that the church can help get in line with the congregation and understand who are we pastoring and what are their needs? And maybe the needs look a little different than they did a couple years ago. How do we shift that without kind of breaking who we are as a church?
It's funny because I think about, just kind of revisiting all these things is very stressful. I'm like, oh, those were really hard times in life.
Yeah.
But I wasn't even required to lead the church at that point in time. I was just required to be on staff and do my job. And I cannot imagine how like exponentially harder it would be trying to, be a spouse, be a parent, and also be expected to lead a church in addition to maintaining a healthy relationship with God and with the world around you. If you think about senior pastors, how many times do they get pulled away from family vacation because there's a funeral that has to be done, or because something tragic happened? Like how many times are pastors not there for their families because they're doing the Lord's work? It's heartbreaking, and that's why we're seeing some of our well-being isn't where it should be, and our relationships are not where it should be. So we did an episode here not too long ago about how to pray for your pastors, because pastors need prayer.
Yeah.
We did another episode about what to do when your leader or pastor fails you.
Yeah.
So kind of along that vein, what are we supposed to do for these people?
Yeah. I would say that there is responsibility on both ends, like for our pastors and for our congregations. For the pastors, I would say it's listening and hearing what the congregation is saying they need. What are the needs of the people that you are pastoring? And I think a lot of times as pastors, we can be quick to just assume, like, oh, I think I know what they want, or I think I'm understanding it. But sometimes it's okay to just be still and understand it. Like go in the foyer and just listen to people talk, or engage with them and hear what is important to them right now. Like, what are they saying? Where are their shortcomings, those kinds of things. And so understanding the demographic and then finding ways that the church can help with that in a way that feels more connected. As a congregation, I think it's speaking up and letting your pastor hear that, and not necessarily filling the suggestion box with all your things that need to change, but more so being willing to speak about those things and then trusting your church to traverse that in a way that is healthy.
Well, it's so interesting because the church is such a diverse body. You've got little kids, I've got big kids. We're in very different seasons of life. So what you're needing in this season is very different from what I'm needing. And I feel kind of bad for pastors that have to meet those needs of all, different, just so much diversity. So it makes me want to extend grace to our pastors. It makes me want
sure.
to pray for protection for them, for their marriages, for their home lives. And because they shoulder a great burden for the church. They do it joyfully, and that's what they're called to do. But that's a hard job.
Yeah, I would say give them cut them some slack, you know, and give the pastors a chance to try to lead in a way that also cares for their families, cares for themselves. And if your pastor is caring for themselves, if they are caring for their family, odds are they're probably going to care for you well.
Right.
And so give them the chance to say no to things. Give them the chance to say not yet or things like that, because that is typically them exercising a healthy understanding of the balance of those things too.
I would even add on to that, one of my pet peeves is kind of this transient culture that we have in churches. It's like, this church did something that I didn't like, so I'm going to leave and go to this other church. And that's not what the church body is about. It's not transactional. It's not because we're always going to agree about everything. It's a family. And you don't flee. You stay with your family. That's me on my soapbox, because a lot of church hopping going on. And so, I mean, a lot of times, it's justified, but it does make me sad, where it's like, oh, how many different churches have you been like a quote unquote member of in the last 5 years? And why did you leave all of them? I would just encourage people to stay.
Yeah.
Be a part of the family.
The challenge. It could be really rewarding. And I think that a lot of times either you can be changed or you can affect change. And so if you are at a spot in a church where you're like, this is not right, something should change, you could be that change. Like, hey, this church should provide more childcare. Guess who should be the first to volunteer?
Exactly.
Or, things like that. And I think that there's a spot where you can understand more of what do you feel like is missing in the church, and then don't do the quiet leaving. Like, talk to someone about it and see, like, what does it look like, and give the pastor a chance to answer. And maybe there's more there than you even realize. Like, hey, we're not focusing on this. Well, yeah, it's really hard to focus on this whenever there's all of this too. And it could be outside of the church's identity too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time on this episode, but I always encourage our listeners, viewers, like, if you guys want to see any of the reports that we're referencing, when Colby and I talk, we're using a lot of Barna studies. That's barna.com if you guys want to go. There's so much information you can dive into that is fascinating, and it's primarily focuses on the church and Christians. So encourage you guys to check that out. If you have any additional questions for us or for Colby, you can send them in at acfellowship.org/podcast. And we just encourage you guys, keep sending us questions, whatever you like. We want to talk about the things that you're interested in, because this podcast only exists because of you and the questions that you're asking. So please keep those coming. And again, I just thank you for joining us. I thank you for joining us. Of
course. Thank you.
And I'm sure we will have you on another episode pretty soon.
Looking forward to it.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.